Picture this. You're invisible, treated like furniture, paid peanuts while making your boss millions. Sound familiar? Well, buckle up, because what I'm about to tell you will flip everything you think you know about power dynamics on its head. My name used to be whispered in corporate hallways as the servant, but now they call me master. And if you stick around for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how I went from being stepped on to stepping up, and how you can do the exact same thing. Trust me, this isn't just another rags to riches story. This is a complete demolition of everything they taught you about staying in your lane. So grab your coffee, silence your phone, and prepare to witness the most explosive career transformation you've ever seen. Because by the end of this video, you'll either be inspired to take action, or you'll realize you're exactly where you deserve to be. They say the darkest hour comes before dawn, but nobody tells you that darkness can last for years. Picture a 22-year-old version of me, fresh out of college with dreams bigger than my bank account and naivety thicker than my student debt. I walked into Morrison and Associates thinking I was going to conquer the business world. Instead, I became their favorite punching bag, and let me tell you, they didn't hold back their punches. My first day started with a handshake and ended with me cleaning coffee stains off the conference room table at 9 p.m. The senior partners looked at me like I was some kind of exotic pet they'd adopted for entertainment. "Hey, servant!" they'd call out across the office, thinking they were being clever with their wordplay on my eagerness to serve. But there was nothing clever about the way they treated me, and there was definitely nothing funny about the way I let them. Every morning at 6:30, I'd arrive at the office before anyone else, brewing coffee for people who wouldn't remember my name if their lives depended on it. I'd organize files for executives who made more in a month than I'd see in a year. I'd sit through meetings where my ideas were dismissed with a wave of the hand, only to hear those same concepts pitched by someone else the following week, to thunderous applause and promotion talks. The breaking point came during the Henderson acquisition deal. I'd spent 3 months researching every angle, every financial detail, every legal loophole that could make or break this $100 million merger. My analysis was flawless, my presentation was bulletproof, and my confidence was sky high. I walked into that boardroom thinking this was my moment to shine, my chance to prove that the servant was ready to sit at the big kid's table. Instead, I watched my direct supervisor present my work as his own. Word for word. Slide for slide. He even used the same jokes I'd written in the margins of my notes. The room erupted in praise for his brilliant insights and innovative approach. Meanwhile, I sat there like a decoration, invisible and irrelevant, watching my intellectual property get stolen in broad daylight while everyone applauded the thief. That night, I sat in my car in the empty parking lot and cried. Not the gentle tears of disappointment, but the ugly, body-shaking sobs of someone who finally realizes they've been playing a rigged game. I called my mom, told her I was thinking about quitting, maybe going back to school, maybe moving back home. She listened patiently, then said something that would haunt me for months. "Honey, some people are born to serve, and there's no shame in that. But here's what my well-meaning mother didn't understand, and what I was just beginning to realize. I wasn't born to serve anyone. I was conditioned to serve, trained to accept crumbs while others feasted on the banquet I'd prepared. The difference between those two things isn't just semantic. It's the difference between destiny and choice, between permanent and temporary, between victim and victor." The months that followed were a masterclass in humiliation. They'd send me to get lunch orders from restaurants across town during important meetings, ensuring I'd miss crucial decisions that affected my own projects. They'd schedule my vacation requests to conflict with major presentations, then act surprised when I had to choose between personal time and career advancement. They'd invite everyone except me to team-building events, then wonder aloud why I seemed so disconnected from the company culture. But something interesting happens when you hit rock bottom with enough force. You either break completely or you bounce back harder than anyone expects. The servant in me was dying a slow, painful death, but something else was being born in its place. Something hungrier, angrier, and infinitely more dangerous than they could have imagined. The final straw came during the annual performance review. My supervisor, the same one who'd stolen my presentation, sat across from me with a smug smile and delivered what he probably thought was constructive feedback. "You're a great team player," he said, checking boxes on his evaluation form without even looking at me. "But you lack the executive presence necessary for advancement. Maybe consider focusing on your support role strengths." Support role strengths, as if being walked on was a skill I'd cultivated intentionally. That's when I realized that, to them, I wasn't an employee with potential. I was a resource to be exploited, a tool to be used until it broke, then discarded without a second thought. That performance review was my burning bush moment, except instead of hearing divine guidance, I heard something much more practical: the sound of my own voice finally saying, "Enough." You know that moment when you're so tired of your own excuses that you'd rather face the unknown than spend another day accepting the unacceptable? That was my Tuesday morning revelation, and it hit harder than my alarm clock ever could. I started documenting everything: every stolen idea, every missed credit, every condescending comment disguised as mentorship. I created a digital paper trail that would make an investigative journalist weep with joy. But here's the thing about gathering evidence: it's not enough to know you're being wronged. You need to understand exactly how the system works so you can use it against itself. So I became a student of corporate warfare. And let me tell you, business school didn't teach half of what I learned in those underground months. I started arriving earlier and staying later, but not for the reasons they thought. While they assumed I was just being the eager little servant again, I was actually conducting reconnaissance missions that would have impressed military strategists. I learned who really made the decisions, who held the real power, and most importantly, who had the most to lose if certain information became public knowledge. Knowledge, as they say, is power, but applied knowledge is domination. The Henderson deal that had been my professional funeral became my resurrection blueprint. See, when my supervisor presented my work, he also inherited all my mistakes. And I'd made some very specific, very intentional mistakes in the version I'd submitted to him. Nothing that would harm the company, mind you, but enough inconsistencies that anyone doing proper due diligence would catch them immediately. I'd spent weeks crafting the perfect trap, and he'd walked right into it during the biggest presentation of his career. When the client started asking pointed questions about the financial projections that didn't add up, I watched him squirm like a fish on dry land. He couldn't answer because he didn't understand the work he'd stolen, and I couldn't help because officially I'd never seen the presentation before. It was beautiful in its simplicity and devastating in its effectiveness. That's when I learned my first master lesson: never seek revenge. Create situations where people defeat themselves. But catching him in a lie was just the appetizer. The main course was much more sophisticated. I'd spent months building relationships with people who actually mattered, not just the ones with impressive titles, but questionable influence. I cultivated connections with IT specialists who understood data security, with HR representatives who knew employment law, with accounting personnel who processed expense reports and travel vouchers. You'd be amazed what people will tell you when you actually listen to them, instead of just waiting for your turn to talk. Through these conversations, I discovered something that made my blood run cold and my ambitions run hot. My department wasn't just stealing ideas from junior employees. They were systematically defrauding clients through inflated billing practices and phantom consulting hours. We're talking about millions of dollars in fraudulent charges spread across dozens of accounts over several years. This wasn't just workplace bullying. This was criminal enterprise disguised as corporate culture. Armed with this information, I faced a choice that would define the rest of my career, and probably my life. I could report the fraud to regulatory authorities and watch the whole department burn, taking my chances in the resulting chaos. Or I could use this information more strategically, leveraging it to secure my own position while forcing systemic changes that would benefit everyone who'd been victimized by their practices. The old me would have run straight to the authorities with my evidence, seeking justice through official channels. But the new me understood something crucial: justice is a luxury, power is a necessity. I chose power, but not the kind they'd been wielding over me. I chose the kind of power that creates positive change while advancing personal goals, the kind that lifts others while elevating yourself, the kind that transforms systems instead of just punishing individuals. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about revolution, and every revolution needs a leader who's willing to risk everything for the chance to change everything. The plan I developed was elegant in its complexity and ruthless in its efficiency. Instead of destroying careers, I was going to rebuild the entire power structure with myself at the top and genuine merit as the foundation. Instead of seeking personal vindication, I was going to create an environment where talent was rewarded and mediocrity was exposed. Instead of playing their game by their rules, I was going to change the rules entirely and force them to play by mine. The transformation from servant to master didn't happen overnight, but when it did happen, it was like watching dominoes fall in reverse. Instead of everything collapsing, everything started building upward, with me as the architect of a completely new organizational structure. The first domino was a carefully orchestrated meeting with the managing partner, where I presented not accusations, but solutions to problems he didn't even know existed. I walked into his corner office with a proposal that would revolutionize how the firm operated, increase client satisfaction, and coincidentally eliminate the fraudulent practices that could have destroyed the company if discovered by regulators. I didn't mention the evidence I'd gathered. I didn't need to. Instead, I positioned myself as the person who could solve problems rather than create them, the employee who saw opportunities where others saw obstacles. By the end of that meeting, I had been promoted to senior consultant with a mandate to restructure the entire client services division. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. The same people who had called me servant were now reporting to the master they'd created through their own negligence and arrogance. My former supervisor found himself explaining his methodologies to me in weekly review meetings, sweating through expensive shirts as he struggled to defend practices he'd never actually understood. The tables hadn't just turned, they'd been completely rebuilt with new legs, a new surface, and new seating arrangements. But here's where the story gets interesting, because becoming a master isn't just about gaining power over others. It's about mastering yourself and the systems around you. I didn't fire anyone immediately. I didn't humiliate them publicly. I didn't even gloat about my ascension. Instead, I did something much more powerful. I gave them the opportunity to prove they could adapt to new leadership and new standards. Some rose to the challenge and became valuable team members. Others revealed their true nature and eliminated themselves through their own incompetence. The changes I implemented weren't just about personal vindication. They were about creating sustainable excellence that would outlast my tenure. I established transparent performance metrics that made it impossible for anyone to steal credit or hide mediocrity. I created mentorship programs that ensured junior employees would never experience what I'd endured. I instituted client feedback systems that held everyone accountable for actual results rather than political maneuvering. Within 6 months, our division became the most profitable in the company's history. Client retention reached record highs. Employee satisfaction surveys showed dramatic improvements. Most importantly, we were generating legitimate success through legitimate means, proving that ethical practices and profitable outcomes weren't mutually exclusive. The servant who'd been stepped on was now the master who lifted others up, and the results spoke louder than any revenge fantasy ever could. The ultimate validation came during the annual company retreat, where I was asked to present our division's turnaround strategy to the entire firm. Standing at the podium where I'd once been invisible, addressing an audience that had once dismissed me, I realized that mastery isn't about dominance. It's about influence. It's not about making people fear you. It's about making them want to follow you. It's not about proving you were right all along. It's about creating new possibilities that make the past irrelevant. Today, 3 years after my transformation, I run my own consulting firm, with offices in 4 cities and clients on 3 continents. The people who once called me servant now seek my advice, recommendation letters, and business partnerships. Some have even apologized for their past behavior, though I tell them apologies aren't necessary. Their treatment of me wasn't personal, it was systemic, and I chose to change the system rather than perpetuate it. But here's what I want you to understand, because this is where your transformation begins. You don't need to wait for permission to become who you're capable of being. You don't need to accept other people's limitations as your own reality. You don't need to serve anyone who doesn't recognize your value, respect your contributions, or appreciate your potential. The only person who can keep you in servant mode is yourself, and the only person who can elevate you to master status is also yourself. The choice is yours, and it's available right now. You can continue accepting crumbs from people who feast on your labor, or you can build your own table and invite others to join you as equals. You can keep playing by rules designed to keep you down, or you can rewrite the rules to lift everyone up. You can remain the servant they think you are, or you can become the master you were always meant to be. The transformation starts with a single decision, and that decision is entirely yours to make. What's it going to be?